Hey guys, hey! Welcome to season 3 of The Inside Job. Now, season 3, as we like to call it, it's the Witham season. What's in it for me, as in what's in it for you. In this season, we kind of move from the interview format into having more intimate conversations. Every episode, I will have a new co host, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey guys, hey! Welcome to another episode of The Inside Job. Thank you for tuning in and joining in the conversation with myself and my lovely co-host today, Deborah Lacy. Now, Deborah is super special to me because she was the very first person to respond to our call to action that we had on our social media platform, inviting people to be our co-host for season 3. Now, Deborah is a therapist and a love alchemist. Did I say it right? Good. Now, before I get into what a love alchemist is, we like to start off the show with a new game that we have called Getting to Know Me in a Flash. Basically, it's just 5 quick questions, random questions, and just answer it, whatever comes to your mind first. Are you ready?
Okay, cool.
All right. First question. If someone asked you to be your apprentice and learned all that you know, what would you teach them?
Well, first of all, I think I would teach them to start with a self-practice, so that in terms of certainly working with other people, we really need to be open to, we really need to be clear ourselves, and we need to be like an open vessel and not coming with our own agenda and our own stuff. So I would definitely start with a self-practice of whatever's aligned for that person, but maybe daily meditation or time for reflection or going within, and just being sure that you are clearing as much of your own stuff as possible before you start to work with other people. And it's a lot of people want to go out and fix people and be the hero and the savior and whatever, but ultimately it's a journey of our own development, our own growth.
Okay.
So
So
I would start with
self-development.
that. Yeah.
All right. Next question. When did something start out badly for you, but in the end, it was great?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. Well, I do think that ultimately I'm going to come up with an example as I'm sharing this, but I think ultimately that every situation that we might label as bad is ultimately an opportunity to, it has a gift in it. It has an opportunity to grow. You have an opportunity to make a choice in that moment. And so I think for me, it's probably a couple of relationships I've had that I've thought that haven't been great, but the journey of the relationship has brought me to a new place that has taught me a whole lot of new things about myself. Um, so I don't really like to call them bad, the relationships, because I learned from them and I grew from them. But I suppose for me, that kind of what stands out really is just that journey of trying to find love, it not working out, but then realizing, well, thank God it didn't, because actually I was meant to be exactly where I am.
Amen to
I hope
that
that
one.
doesn't sound too obscure, like I'm completely
No,
avoiding answering the
come on. No,
question.
no, no. It goes back to what you're saying about every disappointment leads to an appointment, right?
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
totally agree. Okay. On a lighter note, what food is delicious but a pain to eat?
A pain to eat. So what did you mean? Like it's just a faff to make, or
For me, for example, I love hard shell crab and lobster, but it's so much work to get
I
in
see
there.
it's a bit of a faff. Yeah,
And
I would
yeah,
say probably pasta. Like I absolutely love pasta. My daughter also loves pasta, but it's very much like if it's spaghetti, it's like is it going to flick somewhere? If you're in a restaurant, it's not like it's quite, to eat it with a sort of elegance or not getting all over your clothes. And that is just, so I'd probably say spaghetti.
Yeah, I've had that a few times, and that sauce. And it's usually when I'm wearing something white.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Then I get the sauce. And what was cool when you were young, but isn't cool now?
Gosh, well, I think a
Not
lot of
that
what
you're
was,
not young anymore. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you're
well,
like 16.
don't worry, when I was young was a long time ago. But a lot of what was cool when I was young is kind of quite hip now. I'm thinking about like hang tens. They
What's
basically
that?
were sliders, hang
Oh,
ten sliders, that have kind of were uncool, but now they've become really cool again. So I'm a child of the sort of 70s, so very much my parents were quite hippie-ish, and that whole era has just come back in such full force. But definitely, if I look back at some of the clothes I wore, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? Like a pink satin shirt with like a brooch here, and I was just like, oh, what was
I,
I thinking?
I feel like I've looked in a few of those magazines and they're back.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
definitely.
that's what. But just to be clear, a slide, do you mean like backless sandals,
Yes,
like a
yes, with
mule?
just a sort of thing
Okay.
that comes over your toes, and
Okay.
I used to wear them until they broke, and then wear them until they broke.
I just bought two
Um,
pairs of that, so that's funny. Um, and last question. If you were moving to another country but could only pack one carry-on size bag, what would you pack?
um, so I want to say like a book, but it would be very difficult to choose one book. But I do love to read, so I would have a book of some sort in my bag, and I use a lot of essential oils. I love to travel with essential oils, so I would take some nice essential oils with me,
Ooh.
and yeah, maybe one change of clothes, some fresh undies, and lots of water, and a credit card, or
Uh,
like a bank
yes.
card, a bank card, passport, and that's pretty much what all you need.
What kind of oil? Because I love oils as well.
Um, so can I mention the brand that I use?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I use doTERRA essential oils,
Oh,
and they're therapeutic grade oils. So a lot of them you can take internally as well. So you can put lemon oil in your water, or you could. So they're oils like for when you're traveling, you can get like often
oh,
get indigestion, and there's a lovely oil blend for that you can just drink, and it's or there's oils for grounding when you arrive. There's oils that are uplifting. There's a lovely oil that is a like antibacterial, but it also builds your immune system. So it's not
oh.
putting all these chemicals on your skin all the time. So you can use it as a kind of a barrier to protect yourself, especially now traveling with the whole pandemic.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
also,
that's what I
as
was
you put
asking
it,
you.
yeah, as you put it on your skin, the oils help to build your immune system as well as kill bacteria and viruses and that naturally. So,
All
yeah,
right, I'm gonna hit you up after the show for
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
I think my sister would love that as well. She's all about natural oils and things like that, and especially in a time like this. Yeah, very helpful. All right, well, now that we got to know some interesting facts about you in a couple of minutes, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Who is Deborah? And, how did Deborah get to where she is now?
Well, gosh, that is quite something. But I suppose because of the nature of what I do now, which is to work supporting women primarily. Sometimes I do work with men as well. To overcome past trauma, to really be fully living in their life. I really do see my life as a kind of a journey that has led up to this, that there's been all these different things, but in a sort of in a more interesting way. I am South African. I was born in South Africa, and in the late 60s,
Oh, wow.
I know, I
You
know.
look good. You look good.
I've been around the block a few times. So I grew up in South Africa during apartheid. It was a very crazy time and experience to grow up in. I was very, very fortunate to be raised by two women and a man. My dad was there for part of it, and then I had a stepfather as well. But primarily, I had my mother, and then I had an African black woman who worked for my family for 3 generations, who really I saw as my mother as well. So I had these like two mothers, very different personalities, and so I had that amazing opportunity to really be immersed in her culture, in her family, which was quite. It wasn't unique at the time in South Africa. A lot of white children were raised by black women in many ways because they were the ones that were taking care of them. But we definitely had a very unique relationship, a unique situation because she was just the most extraordinary woman. So she really became a huge inspiration to me, a huge part of my life. My mother worked and provided for us in many ways, and in a lot of ways, my other mother, Margaret, was like the taker. She was also the disciplinarian sometimes. Anyway, so I grew up in this kind of very interesting home and environment, and when I was younger, from when my mother remarried around the age when I was about 7, it became a violent relationship. And so living with that domestic violence for 7 years, but, Margaret also was someone who became quite a stability and a rock in that time because she was there all the time for us, the children. So, so this was really in a way where I do believe that mostly what, a lot of our kind of limiting beliefs and things that we have within ourselves start very young, generally before 7. But this had a huge impact on my life and my sense of safety, my sense of relationships, my sense of men, my sense of processing anger, all these things that we need to learn growing up to really function in a healthy way as an adult was really thrown off kilter in that time. And so and then my dad was a meditator, very into Eastern philosophy and spirituality, and he was a vegetarian, and I had all that exposure to a lot of Eastern principles, and then and then I went on. To cut a long story short, I went on to study human movement studies and psychology and teaching, and I taught special needs for 10 years. I taught children with autism, I taught deaf children, and then I came over to the UK about 22 years ago now and taught special needs, but always wanted to become a therapist and always wanted to work with people, really for people to be happier. It's really kind of the essence of what I wanted to do, and then spent a lot of time and years overcoming and healing some of the trauma from my past, because a lot of the trauma played out in my adult relationships, which I'm sure we'll go into a little bit later. But then I eventually qualified in 6 different modalities, Eastern and Western, and have kind of come to a point now where I've drawn from all of those different modalities and created Love Alchemy, because it's really like this pot of lots of different things. So it was just, I had to find a name for it myself, because it just wasn't any one of those original things anymore, to become something else. So that's kind of, and I'm a single mom. I live in London. My daughter's almost 14, and that's where I'm at today.
Well, you just gave me so much good information. And one of the things that stuck out to me is you mentioned that you were raised by 2 different women, which I can definitely relate to, because my dad, I think the last time I saw him, I must have been 8. But I was raised by such a strong community of women that I was okay, thank God. Now you mentioned these two women, and you said they're very different. What one takeaway did you get, or one thing did you take from each of these two very women to help shape the person you are today?
So that's a really beautiful question. So my mother, Colleen, is she's none of my parents are still alive, and my mother was really quite an extraordinary woman for her time. She was talking about the ozone layer, and we couldn't buy spray deodorants. We had to get roll-on deodorants. And this was a long time ago. And she was very conscious, very aware. But what I really got from her, she was very unapologetically herself. She was quite eccentric. She was quite hippie. She wouldn't care if she was barefoot or she really was very eccentric, and she just showed up as herself. She didn't try and ever be anybody else except herself. So I really, really loved that about her. And Margaret lived her truth like nobody that I know. Honestly, she did what was right in her heart, no matter what the circumstances. To the point that if she believed something was right, then she did it. And she did it with such conviction. Like, she just didn't have fear. I'm sure she worried about stuff. In fact, she worried about a lot of things. She worried about her children who couldn't live with her. She worried about providing for them. She worried about her safety. As a black woman during apartheid, there was a lot going on for her, but she lived fearlessly. And she was also very, very devoted Christian. At the end of her life, she became a pastor. She was very spiritual as well, and we used to have long conversations and chats about God. But the thing about her is that, I'll give you an example where there was an incident when she was working for my grandmother, and that my aunt was quite young at the time, and there was some turmoil going on in the home, and my aunt had gone up to Margaret's room, which they had all the servants, and that's what they were called at the time. The domestics workers had these rooms at the top of the flat where they slept at night. And my aunt was up in the room, and my grandmother came and knocked on the door and said, "I'm going to call the police." And Margaret was, "Call them." Her interest was in being there for my aunt. She was like, "Well, call them." And of course, my grandmother didn't, and everything kind of worked out. But it's just, at that time, it's just remarkable how she, spoke her truth, lived her truth, and would tell anybody in the streets if she thought something was wrong that you were doing. She will just tell you, very, she didn't hold back, I mean, I'm not like that. I'm definitely not like that. I wish I could be more straightforward and just tell people what I really think. I'm definitely a conflict avoidant type of person. But she was so strong in what she believed. She just told people straight. So.
I find that the old school people, because my mom, not my mom, well, my mom too, but my grandmother, grand aunt, the older generation, they're very blunt, and you'll know exactly what they're feeling. They're not going to pretend, they're not going to sugarcoat it. And I think to some degree that's good, because at least you know what you're dealing with, and there are no surprises. So to me, I think that's a good quality to have, somebody that's just honest. Don't ask them if you don't want to hear the truth. Do not ask them, because they're going to tell you. So I think that's good. And you mentioned that you don't like confrontation. I find that a lot of us, we don't really like it. Why do you think it is that not that you want to be in somebody's space, but why do you think it is that you kind of back down, or you don't exactly say what's on your mind?
Well, ultimately, I think it comes down, and I mean, I just wanted to say as a sort of it's not really a disclaimer, but it's more like a footnote, that a lot of what I say about my life is after years of reflection and exploration. It's
Yeah.
not like I had these insights at the time, or I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm like, conflict avoidant because of this and this. I've really thought about these things. I've
Mm.
been really doing on this kind of journey of self-discovery and healing for over 25 years. So, you know, I just want to share that because it's not always easy to come to these insights about oneself or about past relationships. So I've had a lot of support along the way in coming to these understandings of myself. But I think fundamentally, at the bottom of anything we're avoiding is poor self esteem, not feeling confident in oneself because you're afraid that your opinion is going to be rejected or not approved. There's some sort of approval seeking. You just want people to be okay. Like, I want people to be okay with me. I want them to like me, to understand me. And then if I feel like I am going to say something that is going to upset somebody, I hate upsetting people. But sometimes the truth might be difficult to hear. Um, and I think primarily it stems from the living with domestic violence and the unpredictable nature of that, and the walking on eggshells, and that having this sort of never quite knowing what's going to happen and how a person is going to respond or react, and then that playing out in my adult relationships, you know, dated a narcissist, and being in relationships where there's codependency or people have anger issues and stuff, then just so wanting to avoid a blow up. But ultimately what happens is you have the blow up anyway, because it's like a pressure cooker. That lid is going to pop
Mhm.
at some point. And so I have been in people's faces, but it's like an out of control in your face. It's not like, hang on, I'm feeling really angry here, and this is what's happening, and I really need to share this. It's sort of like not being able to say that, and then just finding something to pick on somebody about because you've got all that anger that needs to get out.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
complex thing, but
Yeah, and then the reason why I'm asking that is because I know for me, I used to be like that as well, where it's almost like I always wanted to make everyone happy. As long as everyone's happy and then I'm good. That was always my goal, just to make you happy. And I would just bite my tongue to avoid that confrontation. But then when I hit a certain age, I was just like, no, my happiness is the most important thing. And like you're saying, like I didn't go out and I'm gonna be mean and rude and hurt people's feelings, but I just wasn't having it anymore. That's why I was asking, because I know that's how I was as well. Like I just always wanted everyone to be happy and just always put in other people before myself, which is probably something I learned from my mom because she does that as well, but she is blunt though. She will tell you. I think it's once you reach a certain age, I suppose. But kind of going more into one more thing before I even get into that. Now, you mentioned that you moved from South Africa to London 22 years ago. What made you move here and why are you still here?
well, so basically, I was working as a teacher in South Africa, in Cape Town at the time, and I was very much living paycheck to paycheck. And I just thought I'm never going to go anywhere. I'm never going to travel. I'm never going to, be able to see the world because, the salary was sort of enough to get by, but it was never enough to sort of put money aside to save and travel. And with the rand and pound exchange rate, it was kind of, I thought I'm never going to get anywhere. So it was partly out of having come out of a relationship that was a very, very destructive relationship for me, and because of the context of my life, I just sort of realized one day this penny dropped, and I was just like, I actually don't need to stay in this situation anymore. I'm out of the relationship. I'm free to do whatever I want. I can go anywhere. Why don't I go and work in London? I have an Irish passport because my grandmother,
Ah,
yeah, my grandmother is
nice.
Irish. So I was very fortunate because it's not easy. It wasn't easy at the time for South Africans to come to London. And so I just applied for a teaching job here. And then I came over, and my plan was to come over for 2 years. I had no intention of staying here. I didn't immigrate. I was probably running a little bit from this particular person, but I wasn't running from anything in terms of South Africa or the political situation. I absolutely love South Africa, and I go back as often as I can. And then anyway, I just was teaching and traveling, and it was really great. I got to go to New York and Ireland and Greece, and just started, like, it was really cool. Like, I just, I mostly stay with people when I was traveling, so it wasn't these huge expensive trips, but I could buy the flights and I could live. And so I was doing that. And then I guess ultimately what happened was I got married, and the plan was to go back to South Africa, and we'd bought a house and we were going to go back. And my husband at the time was just saying, look, let's build more of a nest egg. We need, more to if we're going to move, we just need to have a sort of a solid foundation when we go. And then we separated. But my daughter was very young, and basically I've stayed here primarily for them to have a relationship, I couldn't because my dad left when my mother and father split up. The hows and whys are like, there are lots of different versions of it, so I don't want to like convey anything, but they split up when I was about 4.5. So my dad, I did see my dad quite a lot, and we had a really special relationship, especially from my sort of teen years going forward. I lived with him for a little while, and we had a lovely relationship. He really was one of my best friends, and he had sadly died at 67, which was pretty young. He had muscular sclerosis, I think. But I just couldn't do that. I just thought, I just couldn't take my daughter away from her dad, ultimately. And so, here we are still in London. I can't, the things I love about London, but the things I also miss about South Africa for sure.
Like what?
The sunshine.
Oh, yes. I moved here from LA, so yes.
And there's really South Africa's got a very, very warm, very hospitable, very friendly culture. And I feel it takes longer in fact, a lot of my friends I have got a lot of lovely English friends, and I've got a lot of friends that are from, Poland and Ireland and Czech and Jamaica, and in fact, a lot of the friends that I've made are actually from other countries as well. And I think because I think why London can be quite hard is because there's a lot of movement. People are coming and going, so you make friendships and then people move on, or people move out of London. A lot of my very good friends that are English have chosen to move more into the countryside, and so it's been quite a challenging city to be in some ways. But I can't even remember the question now. What you
That's so good.
My mind's gone. What did I love about South? What I miss about South Africa?
That's why. Listen, this is a conversation. It's so
the people.
It kind of goes into its own direction.
And my family, of course. I miss my family. I do. I have quite a lot of siblings, but 2 of my siblings are in South Africa, and so I miss them.
And you know what? And you touched on it, and it's relationship, which kind of segues into, what it is that you do and how you help others. Why don't you tell all of us just a little bit more? I'm still I had to make sure that I knew what a love alchemist was.
Well, I don't know. I don't even know if it's been defined yet.
I looked up the word because I was like, I think I know what it means. The way how she puts it together. And then I was like, well, let me make sure that I have it right. So, on Google, you press the sound thing to make sure you're pronouncing it right. So tell us a little
Yeah.
more about what it is, your program and what inspired you to help women and men. I'm assuming because you did mention men as well, just to help women primarily.
Yeah.
How did this come about?
So, as I was saying, I started training about 18 years ago or 19 years ago as in various different modalities, and ultimately, when I wanted to set up a business from move from just having one-to-one clients to establishing a program, I really sort of put out that prayer of like who would be the best niche to serve, like who would be the like my ideal client in a way. And it just really dropped into me. It was abusive relationships, and having experienced my mother's journey with her and witnessed her journey and the impact it had on all her children. It really impacted on all of us in different ways. And then seeing how I played those patterns out in my own relationships, especially in my early 20s, it was really a bit of a nightmare, in all honesty. And so having then sort of got to such a dark part in my life and then started that journey of healing and exploring and discovering, and it was a long journey for me. And I'm not going to lie, I've read a gazillion books, I've done lots of training and lots of courses and lots of different types of therapies. And really the essence came down to it for me at the end, when I was really working with my own with clients one to one, is that the essence for me in terms of the transformation journey is about love. And really, when we are feeling disconnected, which was kind of what had happened to me, and I suppose what I should say before I go into this is that my initial goal was to help women to break that cycle. And I only work with women on my program. I work with men one to one if they want to work with me. But at the moment, I've kept it as a women group. But I also want to do some projects later in the year for men as well with an amazing friend of mine. We're going to do some cool work for men. So I really wanted to break the cycle for the woman herself, because otherwise, women just go from relationship to relationship and they play it out and they can't understand why it's not actually the person that they've, drawn into their life that is reflecting a pattern in them. And it's very hard to see, and it's quite hard to own that initially. It's taking that responsibility is a big step, and it's the bravest step, and it's the most empowering step to take, to realize that we are 100% responsible for our experiences, how we experience life. That's not to say we are 100% responsible for other people's choices, but what we do about it, how we process it, how we respond to it is 100% up to us. And we can 100% heal our past. We can't change the past, but we can heal how it's impacting us. So I was really seeing in my clients this transformation, and I created this online program for women who have been in abusive or toxic relationships. And as it's evolved, because I'm evolving, as I evolve, my business evolves and my work evolves and my clients evolve. It's not like I have arrived and this is what I'm going to do for the next 50 years, if I live that long. But the thing is that, so I thought about this love alchemy. So the essence for me is that I've done a lot of different modalities, and I find that a lot of the talking modalities, I found them quite frustrating, because I thought, look, I understand why I'm attracting these men, and I understand why I'm depressed, and I understand why I'm shut down. But what do I do with the pain? How do I get this pain out of my body? How do I change these behaviors that feel compulsive or
Yes.
addictive
Yes.
or out of control? How do I control my thoughts that feel like they're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour and I don't feel like I have control?
Yes.
And this has got me thinking a lot lately about choice, because we always have a choice. And actually, the book The Choice by Edith Eger, who's an Auschwitz survivor and now a psychologist, is one of the most remarkable books I've read in the last couple of years. And this idea that we always have a choice as to what we're thinking, how we're going to respond. And it doesn't always feel like a choice, because ultimately we've got so much going on unconsciously that we are not aware of. And so we don't have a choice always as to how that shows up. But once it shows up, we can choose to be conscious, and we can make a choice around that. So if you practice the tools that I teach in my program, you start to be able to witness and recognize when you're going into fight or flight or freeze, and how to process that in a healthier way, or how to release emotions, how to heal your younger self, how to love all aspects of yourself. Because the disconnect is a disconnect from love. And really, in a way, I would, for me, love and the divine is the same thing. So, and alchemy is really it's basically described as the magical, like a process of transformation where there's an element of magic. So that's kind of alchemy, when they turn like something into gold. It's like there's this process of magic, that this transformation happens. And for me, I'm taking people through a journey of transformation, but there is an element of magic, and the magic is love, or the divine, whatever you want to call it. So for me, it's essential for that to be a central part of any healing or transformation. And ultimately, I think that's what we're all after. We all want to just feel loved. We want to feel happy.
I'm going to stop you, because you're
sorry. I can go forever about this. I love
too many good things. And I just want to get 1 and 2 in there. The first thing that you mentioned was choice. And that is very important. I had a conversation with our Stephanie Dunstan. She was a season premiere. And so she came from a rough background, South Philly. And what she mentioned was she made a choice to change her mind, and decided that she wasn't going to become a product of her environment, that she was going to do something different, that she was going to make a difference. And I think when you said that, I just thought about how important it is. The first thing is you have to make that choice that I'm not going to be like this. I'm not going to be like this anymore. And it's hard. I think it's very hard. I mean, and you'll know, it's hard to make that choice, to decide that, okay, I'm going to do things differently. And then you said magical. That got me excited. Tell me a little bit more about the magic.
So I just wanted to say, I did listen to that episode, and yeah, I also loved what she said. And some people talk about you have to make a decision. And a decision and a choice may have slightly different angles, but it's like deciding, this is what I'm going to do. And then you choose in each moment you got to make choices. And then there's another third element that is even more important. Once you've made a choice, is you have to take action.
Yes.
Because a lot of us make the choice, like I've said, oh, I don't want this, and I don't want to be here, and I'm never, like, I can remember saying that I would never ever like tolerate somebody hurting me physically. Now, obviously, because my mother had been through physical abuse, I was like, that would never happen to me. And, I was like adamant. But ultimately, you've internalized all these unhealthy, dysfunctional patterns, which is why the second reason it's really important to break the cycle is so your children don't have to live through it as well. Like, break it now, and then at least give them that chance to not have to repeat it. But the other element is taking action, is realizing, okay, I understand that this happened to me, but then you say, okay, I have a choice, but you got to act on it. Because a lot of women, what they do is they watch a lot of YouTube and read a lot of books, and there's all this understanding, but they're not taking action. And it takes courage, it takes courage to take action. And when you have a choice, and I'm going to talk about the magic, I haven't forgotten, but when you have a choice that, sometimes I really understand for women who are in situations that are really toxic, it doesn't feel like you have a choice. but we always have a choice. And a mentor once said to me, like somebody can choose to be in a terrible situation or to be homeless. Now, you might not want to be homeless, but it's still a choice. It's still ultimately, there's an element of choice in everything that we do. And not everybody wants to, a lot of women have felt like a victim in the situation. But if we really unpack it and look at it, there were choices that they made where they maybe ignored some red flags right at the beginning, where they maybe had more choice. They maybe weren't married or didn't have kids or weren't financially dependent. And they unconsciously even chose those things. So there's no blame here. It's not anybody's fault. But ultimately, when we realize we can make our choices more conscious, it's just so empowering. So for me, the magic is really it's in the divine, it's in the collective, it's in the beautiful creative energy that is our true nature. I mean, our true, I share this with my clients all the time, that you are a part of the divine, you're a reflection of the divine, and you have this incredible energy of the creative energy. If you just look at nature and just how miraculous nature is, or animals or humans, or giving birth to a child, it's just remarkable. Like we can't recreate that as humans. We can't create a plant from a seed. We can't do that. There's this incredible generative powerful creative energy, and particularly women, we have this creative center in our bodies, our lower chakras filled with this creative energy where we give birth to ideas, to concepts. And we have that ability, but we've just forgotten. We've just become disconnected. So the magic for me is when I start to see my clients connecting to that heart wisdom, to that eternal self, that part of themselves that is never going to die, that has been a witness to everything, is unaffected by abuse because it's pure love, it's pure source. And they start to realize that and just see the light start shining in their eyes again, and starting to realize, hang on, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my past, I'm not all those terrible things somebody said to me, I'm not what's happened to me in the past. I'm really this beautiful, divine, loving energy that is in this physical form, moving through this life, making choices. And the more we listen to that heart wisdom and that divine aspect of ourselves, the more aligned our choices become, and the more powerful we generate and shift things in our lives and create healthier relationships. And because we co-creating our lives, we're not just passive victims of life.
And
I believe anyway.
No. Again, I felt transformed as you were saying it. It's like, okay, now I can see the magic. I'm feeling the magic. And one of the main reason why, when we spoke on the phone, and I was so happy that you reached out to us in terms of relationship, and you made it clear that you weren't about 5 steps to finding a man in 25 days and all of that stuff. I think that's very important, because when you look on these different social media platforms, these people that talk about relationships, not all, but a lot, it's just giving you these quick steps, and you need to do this to get a man, and you need to do that. And your focus is on the individual, because you could get a man in 10 days, but can you keep him? And so I think that's why I wanted you to be a part of this conversation. And in terms of toxic relationship that you mentioned, it could very well be that someone's in a toxic relationship, but they don't know, because they might just think, well, he's not beating me, so it's not toxic. So how would you know if you're in a toxic relationship? What are some signs?
Well, this is a huge spectrum, right? Because toxic relationships can be even just being neglected, not being heard, not being appreciated, not being treated kindly. So you just don't, you just don't feel good enough. Like there's just a sort of an absence of something, right to the extreme of violence and sexual assault and psychological abuse and, the awful things that happen. There's this whole spectrum. But ultimately, for me, toxic love is an internalized sense of the lie that you've believed about the stories and things you've experienced. So I think it was Buddha that said, being angry with somebody is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And for me, when we have toxic experiences, whether that's through an absence of love or a direct sort of overt painful act towards a person, those wounds that you feel within yourself, if you don't clear them and heal them and transform them and reconnect with that love that is the truth of who you are. If you look at a newborn baby, or even toddlers, they are just like loving life. They don't, unless they've had trauma, they're fearless.
Yeah.
They're open, they're curious, they say what's on their mind until that's conditioned out of them, right? And girls don't do this or boys don't do this, be quiet, all these different conditions are placed on people. So my sense is toxic love is really, it's like that poison. It's like that, all the things that you're still holding on to, because ultimately you're looking for some sense of acceptance, approval, being seen, being loved, but it's not serving you any longer. So for me, like, although I've been focusing on toxic relationships, I've realized that a lot of people, it can just be trauma. It can just be a trauma. It can just be something painful. But if it's held in the body in some way, our body's like an energy system, and our emotions and our bodies are enmeshed. So your body is going to, that's why if people don't work with this and heal the wounds, they often have physical projects coming up, cancer, there are things like IBS and migraines and sleep projects, but there's also more serious health projects that show up because stress ultimately will impact the physical body, because it's not, our emotions are not separate from our body. Our thoughts impact our body, our thoughts impact how we feel, and we have a choice as to what we think. We can choose our thoughts. So I think for me, it's really, I'm trying to help spread that message that as long as you think that the external person is the solution, like if you just change this thing outside of yourself, you're going to feel better without addressing the toxic feelings you have inside yourself. And a lot of them can be so deeply suppressed because we often suppress things to cope at the time.
Yeah.
And memories can be suppressed, or sometimes I take people, we do a process where we go and we access memories and we work with that younger self and give her the love that she needs and give her a voice and give her resources and have this beautiful healing with that younger self. And someone will be like, oh, like I've been to this memory so many times and oh, I've dealt with this. And then you go and suddenly you just, boom, this emotion just comes up, sadness, pain, anger, frustration. Because our cells literally hold our memories. The cells in our bodies store the energy of that emotion. So this work is really, for me, super powerful because we can literally go into the body and access those memories and clear out the stuff that's being held on to. And it's been shown scientifically that actually when this happens, the cell receptors actually open up and are healthier once we do this work. And at the same time, it's also about changing your habits and rituals. A lot of toxic love cycles, it's very addictive, very, very addictive. So it's just like getting over anything. That's why for me, you talked earlier about community, like being raised sort of within a community. And I really, really believe that is how we're meant to raise children. It's how we're meant to,
Yes.
I think we should have, I think that's why we have a wedding. I think the wedding is the community coming together to say, we will support you in your relationship. We're going to help you through thick and thin. It's not a big party to get pissed and whatever, in my opinion. It's about being a holy witness to that couple and saying, we are here in support of you. So I don't understand why people invite people to weddings that don't even know them. I'm like, just invite people who really genuinely authentically love and
Yes.
support your union, right? So that's me on another soapbox, but
No,
it's just
I
like
agree. I
we
agree.
should be. I really think, and I think that's been the hardest part for me about being in London, is that I have found little pockets of communities, but they're quite spread out. So I'll do a course and I'll meet the most amazing people, and then we all go back to our different places. And so that sense of community, and I think like even in the 12-step program, it has a spiritual element. You have a mentor, you have a community, and you have to change your habits and rituals. You have to replace that instinctive drive to create drama in your life with something healthier. So what I do in my program is it's about teaching women how to create new habits and rituals. It's being a part of a community, it's having a mentor, and it's doing the deep dive work, and you learn the tools along the way so that you can navigate whatever shows up in life. You've got the tools to release those emotions like instantly from your body. You've got the tools to do the deeper work around your past wounds so that you could, because that's a journey that takes time. And that, so they come out so much more empowered to navigate life, which can be difficult. I mean, like, shit happens. People experience pain. Look at the pandemic. People die.
Mm.
It's not that life is going to be easy, but if you've got the tools to fall back on, and also for me, the habits and rituals, for example, like meditating every day and having time to get still and time to connect with yourself, your guides, your higher self, your whatever you want to call it, but to connect within and get still and hear the guidance that's available to you, then otherwise we on this kind of hamster wheel, and then not getting the life that you say you want. But it's kind of like, well, are you really listening? Are you really following your heart when it comes to what you want to do, or are you doing what your parents thought you should study, or are you doing what society says you should do? Are you, that sort of thing?
I mean, I love, love, love the wedding thing. I got married almost 2 years ago, and it was a small wedding. I'm from Jamaica, so Jamaicans, we roll deep. A lot, it's always a lot of people. And I ended up getting married here, and it was just for a West Indian. I think we probably had like, I want to say 80 people, 70, anything less than 100, 200 is small. And it was the best day of my life. And my husband was just saying that too. It wasn't as big. And I knew that if I was back home, it would have been bigger. And like you're saying, you would have invited people out of obligation. There are a few people that I would have wanted to be there that couldn't make it. But for the most part, everyone was there. And it was the absolute best. It was intimate. People got to know each other. And so I laughed and I got you on that whole wedding. I was like, why do you invite people you don't even know? They're just gonna come to the wedding. But as you mentioned, being a survivor of a toxic relationship and being in that, for someone else that is in it and they know that they're in it, what advice would you give to them in terms of just getting help? Because I imagine that it's not an easy thing for you to admit and then to go ahead and recognize that you need help. What would you say to someone that's in a toxic relationship?
So firstly, I want to mention, one other quick thing, that Margaret sadly passed away in January, just about 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago.
Oh.
And her, because of COVID, I flew back to South Africa for her funeral. But if it hadn't been COVID, the maximum were 50 people in South Africa for a funeral. But if there hadn't been that constraint, there probably have been a few hundred people there, 200-300 people. I mean, she had such an impact on so many communities. And one of her nephews said to me at the funeral that actually he was quite grateful for the pandemic because of the intimacy. That he said, we wouldn't have had this intimacy, we wouldn't have had these beautiful conversations. It would have just been chaos. Well, not chaos, but it would have been full on, So I really, I love, I like things to be authentic. I don't like to waste time with things that that just, I mean, I can be frivolous and silly and have fun, but it's like, I just love human connection. I love that genuine human connection. But what the first thing that comes to mind in terms of women who are in the relationship, now it's a prerequisite to join my program that you can't be in an abusive relationship, because it's just a bit like saying, I'm going to go to AA, but I'm just going to go home every night and hang out in a bar. You just can't, it's very difficult to do the healing work. I also wouldn't, enroll somebody who was struggling with an addiction, because if they, we can do the work, but it's a bit like pulling out the stitches, every time you come back from the doctor and you just pull the stitches out, the wound isn't going to heal. And so it is important to have made that step. What I would say is that a lot of women in these situations are living with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And I would just say that is really the first thing you want to think about dropping, because don't blame yourself, but also don't blame anybody else. Just take your power back. And there are resources. There are a lot of resources in the UK. There are refuge houses, there are phone lines, there's the domestic. I should have had all of these available, but there are a lot of resources available. But it's actually the most difficult thing is actually making the decision to leave, because there can be such strong trauma bonding. There can be financial dependency. There can be a lot of threats as to what's going to happen if you leave. So it's a very, very difficult situation. And I would just say, do try and get help. Do try and speak to somebody. There is counseling services available. A lot of my clients that are on the program have already been through, counseling services provided by the NHS. So just find somebody you can speak to that you can trust, but also really start to believe and know that you are perfect, whole, and complete, as you are, that the abuse doesn't define you, what you've been through doesn't define you, and that you have a choice. You have a choice. You always have a choice. It might not be an easy one, but look for the choices that you have, and just take action. That's the tough one. It's taking action.
Yeah.
Because on average, women go back to an abusive partner apparently on average 7 times. It's a
familiarity.
It's a difficult addiction to break, I'm afraid.
Well, what do we have on the agenda for Deborah?
So for me, well, I've just revamped my whole program. So it was called Recover and Thrive, and I've created Love Alchemy, and I've really just infused a whole lot of new love into the program. And it's a difficult thing because I'm learning and growing all the time, and whatever I'm learning, I'm like want to feed into that so that everybody is benefiting from it. So really for me, it's about, at the moment, just really getting out there, getting in front of more women, just spreading the word and building my business. I'm also navigating being a parent of a teenager, which is quite new and fresh. Ooh. So that's bringing a lot of color into my life. And I'm just really grateful to be out of lockdown. I found the first lockdown I quite enjoyed. I have to be honest. I quite liked the sedentary pace. But the second lockdown, I think it was a little bit harder.
It was torture.
I felt the social isolation impacted on me a lot more in the second lockdown. So I'm loving being back at netball. I'm 6'3", so I play shooter in netball.
Wait, hold up. 6'3"? I knew you were tall. I knew it. I was looking and I was like, she looks like, starting executive producer, she looks like either she modeled or she played volleyball or netball or something, because we say netball in Jamaica too. I was like, one of those things. But pictures, I said, but
Yeah.
she's pretty tall.
Well, my primary sport used to be swimming, and I did swim up until a couple of years ago. I swam at the Masters World Championships a few years ago. But
Wow.
I stopped swimming for a while, and I've been playing netball. I played basketball at university. But yeah, so I'm really loving being back with the team and just outdoors and having a laugh. Um,
Wow.
and really, I also want to just get a bit more creative as well. I did do a master's in art psychotherapy a few years ago, and I feel like I really want to explore my creative side a lot more. And then yeah, I've got a couple of exciting projects, as I said, working with a colleague, friend of mine, doing some workshops for men, because I really do acknowledge that men go through this as well, and men are also experiencing toxic love, and they are also experiencing trauma. But I just found that it's kind of, for a lot of women, it feels safer to just be females, and it's not personal. It's not,
Yeah.
and so when we work with men, we would also just work with men. We wouldn't have, except for us, of course, we'll have two ladies and lots of men. That's kind of my kind of workshop.
All right, well, I'm going to ask you a non-serious question, a fun
Yes, yes,
question.
yeah, yeah. Go for it.
Six
I know it's a very
three.
heavy topic.
How 6'3"? How is it that this didn't think of this before? How is it dating? How was it dating for you being 6'3"? Did you find that the men were intimidated, or they were just like, I got a supermodel girlfriend, wife, or whatever?
Yeah. So dating's sort of quite a distant memory for me. But yeah, I would say, yeah, I think growing up in South Africa, it was challenging because there's definitely that stereotype that a man should always be taller than a woman.
Yeah.
But what I've found is that men who are very confident in themselves and very sure of who they are, they really don't care about the height. They're not, it doesn't bother them. But there is that, and there is it has been a constant challenge, because obviously the number of men who are 6'3" or taller
Oof.
are few and far between, and they also seem to preference to date really tiny little women for some
Unless
reason.
you go to Denmark or, Danish, they tend
Yeah,
to be
I know.
taller.
Or maybe there's some Maasai versus Danish mixed person somewhere that's really tall and gorgeous. But anyway, so look, I've I joke, right? I joke with my friends when I
Yeah.
say, okay, well, I'm going to start tall. I'm going to, because now that lockdown's over, I'm thinking, it's time maybe to start dating. So I'm going to start tall, and then every year I'll drop an inch. So
You're
like,
trying.
you know, in 5, 6 years, I'll be at like 5'9", maybe.
No,
But I'm hoping that it'll be a lot sooner than that, and I'll have this lovely, tall, gorgeous man in my life soon. So
oh no, I
I'll
love
let
the
you
way
know.
how you dropped tall, but how you dropped gorgeous in there. I was like, yes, girl.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
drop
yeah.
that gorgeous in, you drop it in there. And this is girl talk. And this is all about what I mean in terms of having a conversation where obviously, dealing with toxic relationships and talking about that, that's something that's very serious and not something to joke about at all. But at the same time, when we just talk about you and your Amazon statuette figure, I just had to ask, how is it dating? And I know, like in America, especially in Hollywood, they like them.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more. I think as the world just starts to be a little bit more open-minded generally, and you know, be more humanistic in our approach, and
Yeah,
you know, embrace the LGBTQ community, and just let people be who they be. Love is love, and I think that there are far more, not, I don't want to say challenging challenging things about me than my height, But
Yeah.
they think like I don't think a lot of people want to date a therapist. Like it's just they think that you're going to psychoanalyze them
Analyze
or
them, yes.
but it's not true. Like I just want to, I kind of feel that at this point in my life that there's no point in being in a relationship unless it really adds something special to my life because I'm very independent, I'm very self-reliant, I love my own company. I don't need to be with anyone. I choose to. I want to have that companionship and support one another. And that sort of, this sounds like a promo for my next, like, so if anybody's out there, no, I'm joking. So the thing is to just, to say like that, I think that's a challenge. And the other challenge, I think, if we've got time for like one more thing, or not a challenge, but one of the things is that I don't drink alcohol at all. I have my nice lemon water here.
Me
And,
too.
there's a very big, we live in a very big drinking culture. And so, yeah, height is kind of the least of my worries at the moment.
Well, I like to have a little glass of wine every now and then, but I
Yeah.
do believe in everything there must be moderation. So, while I might drink a glass of wine, if I don't have it, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't control me, and and I think that's very important. I
Absolutely.
joke and I say me too with the glass of rosé, but just to point out that that's something that I might choose to do on the weekends and so forth. But I think I love what you said, because until I got married, that was my motto. It is, I love my own company. I love me some me, and I know who I am. And if somebody's going to come into my space, they have to be worth it. And you cannot bring negative energy in my space. So I didn't mind waiting until, and for me, God sent the right person. Whatever you believe in, that's you. But for me, I know that God sent this person for me. And so
Mm,
I was good waiting. I'd rather have the right person and enjoy my life and travel, which is what I was doing actually when I met him, than feel that, because society makes you think that if you're past a certain age, that you should be married and you need to have kids and you need to do this and you need to do that. Why is that? And for guys, it's okay if they're not. They're being successful, but for us, it's just that we're lonely or no one wants us. So I think that's a very good point, that you need to love yourself. And it, based on our conversation, that seems like that's part of the thing that you tell the woman before anyone else can love you. You have to
absolutely.
and you have to love yourself.
Absolutely, it's absolutely central because I say to women, how do you expect someone else to love you if you don't love you? And I mean, love all of you. Love your body,
Yes. Yes.
love, really love all of you, and love the parts of you who made some pretty questionable choices. I've done some pretty dodgy things in the past, but I've just got to have
Like what?
compassion
No,
for.
you don't have to tell me.
I've got to
You don't
have
have to tell me.
compassion
Hmm.
for her and say she was doing the best that she could at the
Yeah.
time. And when we know better, we do better. So it's just about, really, really, really loving yourself. And it's not always easy for people to love themselves. One of the modalities I practice is EFT. It's emotional freedom techniques. It's tapping on the energy body. And one of the setup phrases we say is that even though I feel this emotion or whatever, I love and accept myself. For some people, just to say that is incredibly hard, or it'll bring tears to their eyes. Just to say, I love and accept myself, and it just all this emotion comes up because we are not taught really to love ourselves. It's we sort of not it's not like praised. It's like if you really think you're fantastic, it'll be like, ooh, like don't brag about yourself, don't be too big for your boots, and it's like actually love yourself. That's what, especially the youth of today, young people today are just, it's a really challenging world to be in with social media and all the challenges that kids facing. And ultimately, if when kids really love who they are, then they don't have to have that whole compare and despair thing going on. But that's a whole nother chapter.
And we're gonna end on that note. Love
Yeah.
yourself. Is it Justin Bieber? I think he changed the words though, but he said you should go
Yeah,
and
yeah,
love
yeah.
yourself.
I love that song. I do think it's really genius, those lyrics. It's like he says, go and love yourself. And he says, not even my mother liked you. So why don't you go and love yourself?
Yeah,
And
go and love yourself.
yeah, absolutely.
And Deborah, thank you so
Oh,
much
thank you.
for being a part of this conversation and just giving us all of this information. And you mentioned that you didn't have like the starts or whatever. That's okay. Once this conversation airs, please, give me all of the information as far as the program, your website.
I will do. I
We'll
will
get
do.
everything for all of you guys out there that is interested.
And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. The pleasure was all mine. I'm so glad that you reached out to us and we had the opportunity to talk personally and collectively on the show. Thank you so much. And again, all your information I will have in the description for all of you guys. If you are interested, I'll have all of that for you. And thank you all so much for continuing to watch The Inside Job and traveling with us now to season 3. Yay, we're very excited. And as I like to say, as a young Jamaican lady born and raised, for the most part, in Kingston, Jamaica, walk good, live long, drink water, and prosper. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.